the lecture on the introduction to patent search. In this, we will be covering various concepts in relation to this particular topic. The identification of the purpose is the first aspect of patent search, wherein we need to understand for what is it that we are searching patents for. Understanding historical aspects is the second part of this particular lecture. We will also understand the third aspect of how harmonization of patent law has been important and what impact has it had on patent search and documentation. We will also understand in the introductory aspects of patent search on the value of databases in relation to search. Patents are searched for various purposes. Often it is the very first thing that you would do in a patenting process in order to determine how the invention is different from the existing patents. One also searches to understand the legal implications associated with patents. Today, there are more than 192 different patent offices issuing out more than 100 million patent documents. So, there is a whole wealth of information available for searching with respect to patents. Patents are searched for various purposes and by various people. So, often there are many questions that come to a searcher's mind, and it is important to understand therefore the intention with which we are searching for patents. Is it a part of a normal business process in terms of looking at what are the technology developments, and sometimes a company is planning to bring out new products into the market, and so therefore wants to understand whether it has a clearance, or rather it is doing what we call the freedom to operate search. We will come about with this particular detail in a little later part of the lectures. Sometimes we defensively are also interested in filing patents. So, are we looking at filing patents as a follow-on patent to secure our portfolio? In a merger and acquisition scenario, we are also looking out on who has the maximum wealth of patents in a particular area and make a decision on whether we are going to merge with that particular company or not. The question that also comes to mind is, what is the level of search work that you would be undertaking? Would it mean that you are looking at a simple search, or are you really looking at an in-depth search? These things matter. How critical it is and how important it is for crisis management. For instance, let us say we are in a litigation and looking at the different status of a particular patent across different jurisdictions. It is important to look at, are we going to limit the damage? That is, if you are looking at certain patents, they actually could not, there may be an issue of novelty, in which case, yes, we need to understand what are the other related patents. Are we looking at a long-term strategy for a particular company in terms of what should be the patenting landscape going forward? How many different patents does the company need to file? If we know that there are not many people operating in the area, then maybe you could take a comfortable time to go and file for the patents. For instance, if we know that in a particular technology area there are many people who are operating, then we need to really look at a gainful patent filing. So, therefore, we need to understand whether it is for a short term or whether it is for a long term that we are filing for patents. Today, most of you may also be aware of what we call patent hold-ups. So, today companies may not be actually manufacturing those patents, but actually are holding up by having a lot of follow-on patents in a particular area. So, as a part of a search, are you also engaged in a one-off kind of a search? It is also important to know that. What kind of information is the second important consideration when we come across the aspect of the purpose of a patent of search? Is it purely for technical reasons that we are looking at patents? Are we really in some cases looking at legal information? Is it a scenario where we want to avoid infringement issues? Are we looking at greater enforcement of patents? Then yes, we are looking at patents and what is the status of patents and how the portfolio of patents is being built. Many a time it is also to extract the commercial value. So, are we interested in extracting a commercial value of the invention? They could be very close competitors. So, patent search may also be directed towards understanding who your competitors are, what are they doing, and where are the people who are the prolific inventors and who are the most active applicants. So, again it is also to understand where are the clusters in particular in a particular area of patents. So, many a time when we conduct analysis of patents based on search, we also understand where are the hotspots in a given technological area, and how is it that you can defend your portfolio well, and what is the kind of information that others need in relation to patents is one other important consideration. Today the area has become so competitive that patent search itself is an important area as a profession. Many people take it up. It is also important to organize the results of your search. So, therefore, it is also important to understand who is going to be looking at your results. Accordingly, you will also be making the search. Is it a business manager who is interested in knowing the portfolio of a competitor, in which case your search is directed towards understanding competitors' portfolio in relation to patents. Again, who are the ones who are taking decisions? For instance, a CEO of a company may call you and ask you that what are the kind of different patents we need to advance into the pipeline. So, then you are looking at, well, these are the existing set of patents, these are the new technologies which are developed, these have been filed, some are in the publication. So, you are getting an entire gamut of the status of applications, portfolio, all of that. Sometimes it is also important to leverage competitive intelligence information. So, it is also important to understand the different formats in which patent search information is reported. And so, therefore, depending on how you want to, who wants to see the results of your invention, the results of your search, you also would actually prepare the search oriented towards that particular purpose. So, in this you are able to understand that one is that patent search is done for different purposes, and patent search has to have a specific focus in relation to why we are doing the search. To bring it all that into a nutshell, patent search essentially is for these various purposes. One is to determine how to direct future R&D, and the other area is to look at opportunities in terms of leveraging patents, that is either by licensing opportunities or by merger and acquisitions, to understand how to avoid risks in patent litigation, to conduct strategic research and technology planning. It is important at this stage to realize that today we are no longer in the area of what we call autonomous inventions. Autonomous inventions are the inventions which are generated out of genuine curiosity and which take time, and by the way of R&D there are inventions coming out. Today we live in the area of what we call induced inventions, where inventions need to be made in the sense of we need to be continuously doing application oriented research and look at greater improvements and newer areas in terms of capture in patents. So, therefore, strategic research and technology planning is one important reason why patent search is undertaken. Enhancing the existing capability is also important, that is, how do you build a good patent portfolio. Today it is no longer about single patents, it is about implementing a particular product in a market with a series of patents. It is also very true for the area of electronic inventions, where they are not covered by single patents. So, we discussed in the earlier lectures about predictable arts and unpredictable arts. If you see the unpredictable arts largely in the area of, let us say, biotechnology inventions and pharmaceutical inventions, it is more or less what we call fortress monopoly, that is, enterprises are built based on one or two or more what we call blockbuster patents, large patents. However, in the electronics area and in the inventions related to computers, the implementation is across areas. So, therefore, the need for building patent portfolio is much realized in the area of electronic invention. So, therefore, the enhancing the existing portfolio is important for the certain areas, more so than others. While bringing new products into the market, it's also important to undertake patent search. We talked about it from the point of view of clearance search. Today, it is important to also realize that we have come a long way in terms of patent documentation, cataloging and indexing. So, it is worthwhile to examine the historical aspects of patent search on how all of this began to today what we have a dedicated profession for searchers who are called the patent searchers. So, if you look at some of the early patents and the documentation of it, it provides us some very interesting insights. Some of the earliest of the patents were simply a grant of monopoly. They were read as a scroll in front of the royalty. There was no official system of printing, publication or indexing. And since most of the jurisdictions at some point of time had what we call invention registration system. So, therefore, there was really not much of a wherewithal in terms of the institutional structure in terms of patent offices, and also there was no formal examination of patents in many countries until the 1900s. So, what happened to searchers in that time, and even for normal people to access patents? There was difficulty in accessing patents, one because of the high costs, second because of there were multiple patent offices, multiple branches of patent offices in a given country. Those were the times when patents were not numbered. So, all that you could do is check by only the patentee name and the date only. So, you can imagine in those days how it was with respect to searching for patents was very, very preliminary to that extent. Specific changes to patent policy and the development of institutional structures has had a big role in shaping the area of the patent search. One is the appointment of patent commissioners, opening up of what you call the examination system, where formally patents were examined, which obviously brought in the requirement of indexing, cataloging, all of that. Not only that, elaborate filing requirements also became an important consideration with respect to different patent documents. Some of the earliest patents were maybe a 1-page or 2-page documents. With the development of what we call the elaboration of specification norms, patents needed to be written in a very elaborate fashion. In the earlier lectures, we have talked about different categories of technical data. So many different categories of technical data were not captured in some of the very early patents. Today, you can have a patent which is, let us say, 10 pages. You can also have a patent which is covered into 100 or more pages, which means there has been an elaboration of what we call the specification requirements. So, therefore, this is one important consideration which led to the change in the way patents were being stored and documented. Not only that, we discussed about the value of figures. So, therefore, greater the needs that came up with respect to representation of figures, sequences when it comes to biotechnology, photographs, and again norms with respect to what kind of photographs could be represented. So, patent offices began to give a lot of importance in terms of indexing these, cataloging these, and also documenting these for the purposes of access by not only the patentee, but also by others when it is published. So, this is where you see a sea change in the entire aspect of why the imperative for patent search is realized more now, because today there is a lot of access to patent documentation which was not available in the earlier times. And of course, the computer era has really opened up the ease of search. One is that it's much more easy to search on an online mode because of the use of different patent databases based on online search, which are basically developed based on different computer programs. Today, we can access the entire file history wrapper of a particular patent, when it was filed, what are the documents filed at different stages, when was the patent examined, the response to the particular examination, and up to the grant and even beyond. So, this ease of access is now available because of the computerization of the patent documents. Today, we also have what we call the public access mode and the private access mode. So, in the public access mode, you can access the patent once it is published and all the data that is available. In the private access mode, attorneys can actually look at filing of documents, and that part of it is not available for the public to search. Drawings can be now searched because images are stored in what we call the .tif format. So, there is a specific search that you can do even for accessing drawings at a particular patent office. Now, greater and greater database structures are changing with respect to how the patents are represented, and so therefore, you have newer ways of actually representing patent data. We are also obviously influenced by the artificial intelligence. So, in the artificial intelligence using those tools, we now have very high-end tools available for really looking at sieving out a large amount of patent data and also making it very user friendly and at really very great speeds. So, from a very simple representation of patents to now we have the greater prevalence of online system for the availability of patent search documents. So, one of the important developments that has happened, which has really helped a lot of patent offices, is the development of computers, the advanced computer programs for making the interfaces really very user friendly. That has been on one hand, where the computer area has really made great changes to the way in which patents are documented. The other important change that has happened is the harmonization of patent law and its impact. Some of the aspects of free trade agreements, that is understanding between different countries on certain IP matters. Specifically, when you look at patent offices, the trilateral cooperation is one area wherein the very first instance of experiment of the US, the Japanese Patent Office, the USPTO and the EPO together, looking at joining together to make the practices uniform in relation to certain category of filings, sharing of examination practices, has helped bring in what we call the uniform documentation of patents. And this strategic handling of applications has helped because of to build what we call the rapid examination. So, we would believe that there is something like a prosecution highway that opens up between the trilateral offices, where a given examiner who is looking at a particular application can get the entire documentation of another patent office simultaneously, and that helps in looking at the examination of applications. So, that is one way of what we call share as a mode of strategic handling and of applications for rapid examination. That is one concept. And of course, we have also what we call the patent prosecution highway, which is called the PPH, which is again available at many patent offices, and many patent offices are also signed up, which encompass JPO, EPO, many of the Middle East countries, Korea and many other countries are part of the PPH, again which brings in uniform documentation in relation to a given set of applications. And of course, there has also been an impact of the America Invents Act in the case of US, and how some changes have also made big changes with respect to certain amount of documentation at the patent office in relation to the aspect of the US patent code. There are also these important patent offices which often are also the major jurisdictions of filing. And if you really look at the spread of those, they come into three major economic regions, one being the USPTO, the other being the Japanese Patent Office JPO, and also the European Patent Office, where you have large filings from different regions. And if you really look at the emerging markets and the greater expansion of the IP, you can also consider the patent offices which are of importance, which are China, India, and South Korea. And another major chunk of applications are filed through what we call the PCT mode, and hence understanding the value of PCT filing as a major documentation is also important for a searcher. So these are generally the most important patent offices which are considered, but one must keep in mind that it is possible that you need to also sometime look at, let's say, ROS patent, which is a Russian patent database, or you may go to OSPAT, which is the Australian patent database. For some considerations, those jurisdictions are important. So while these are the major patent offices that one would look at, one must not discount individual search at the some specific patent offices. It actually depends on where and you're looking for patents, and it is possible that many other jurisdictions are also actually quite relevant. So when we looked at the historical aspects of the patent search in terms of how the documentation was in those days, it's worthwhile to examine to really look at the aspects of how some of the patent offices developed from the point of view of documentation and how it has helped searchers to really look at patent information. So while the very first patent was granted in 1790, was for very simple very simple representation and documentation that was available at that point of time. Not until the time of an examination of patents happened at the USPTO, that's sometime around in 1836, to about the necessary incorporation of the need for printing of patent and making it available to the public. Worthy to note is that there was a time when there was a major loss of patents at the USPTO due to certain fire, and then once again the documentation of patents needed to be done. Today there are different resource centers available in the United States where one can actually access patents and of the different inventions. And the very aspect of the issuing of the official gazette started in a much later time. So the development of the publication of patents itself is an important consideration when we come to search, because unless patents are published, there is no way one can search patents. So this gives you an insight into actually when did the publication requirement and the way patents are published at different patent offices. So here in this illustration you see one of the very first patents which were awarded in 1790 was to this particular the machine, which is again the value that was generated was great even in those times. So those were some of the very early representations. Today of course we have a very elaborate documentation that is available at the USPTO. In fact, the USPTO was one of the very first offices to develop the electronic or the online mode of documentation began from there. Of course, there is also search rooms that are available, which are part of what we call the patent and trademark depository libraries that are available at the USPTO, which can be searched for patents. And of course, in those times patents were into the US patent classification code development itself started. And of course you had later times the documentation of patents in the form of microfilms and then CD-ROMs, and there was of course a lot of difficulty in terms of storing, access, indexing to what we know today of access of patents from this kind of data as well, and it's pretty much the case with many other patent offices also during that time. For instance, if you look at the EPO, they also had the paper copies and the microfilm based storage of patent documents, and the SRS service, which is the Science Reference Information Service, was the major service available at the patent office to store patent data and establish the norms for it. And not only had European patent documentation, it also had the entire PCT published application documentation as a grants of European patents. Also, what is important is that the relation to the individual national countries. So, a lot of patent applications from national phase to the EP phase, the documentation of that, developing of norms in relation to that was also important. So, a total of 27 libraries throughout the UK have the data available in relation to one, the publications in relation to UK, PCT part, and also expansion into foreign patent publication as well. So, from the very preliminary way of storing information to developing databases and information systems, one can also realize that if you really look at the historical aspects of patents, it is actually the library information specialists who were the ones who really used to be involved in patent documentation cataloging. So, they pretty much knew the were the people who actually were involved in the entire patent documentation. So, the area of the practice of library information specialist was pretty much with respect to patent documentation. So, at every US patent offices, you had these people who were involved in this practice. Searching by the CD-ROMs was a predominant way of looking at accessing patent applications. So, you have eSpace EPA, which is one set of applications that could be accessed, and of course, then there has been this European Patent Information and Documentation Systems, which again looked at the different sub offices of the EPO and the data related to that. So, again under the EPDOS, you also have different internal databases in relation to how you can search for specific access of information, which is either the PCT applications only, in which case you are looking at eSpace, and eSpace access is where you are looking at the entire aspect of looking at the bibliographic data as well as the abstracts of all the EPO and the PCT applications. So, this is another way of accessing the information. And of course, in the late 1990s is the time when we look at the patents on internet, which is the internet direct access of patent documents free of charge. So, from a time when one had to pay high cost for patents to today, we can access patent documents available on the internet. And of course, there are also dedicated patent servers developed by IBM for certain patents, particularly US patents, and we today have pretty much the links available on the internet on how to access patents at each different patent offices, and many a time today it is a one-stop shop for or the first starting point for for all people who are involved in search every day. So, what you see here is as the USPTO link shown to you and the EPO link shown to you on the screen. So, the Japanese patent office has also gone through a whole series of changes when it comes to storage of patents, where you have the JPO, which is the database that is available, and in 1985 is the time when all English language abstracts of Japanese published applications were available. And of course, there was also this digital library, which is the intellectual property digital library, which also had an entire set of collection of Japanese and other patents. And abstracts itself can be searched at PAJ, which is the Patent Abstracts of Japan search. So, each different patent offices has a different way of actually cataloging the patents. There has been the impact of harmonization of patent office practices also, which has had a big role. We have discussed that a bit earlier itself. Some of the treaties, for instance, if you look at the patent law treaty, which harmonized on the filing practices, also brought in changes with respect to patent applications, and so incorporation that into the individual patent offices as relevant also has made change to certain documentation, which is again relevant for us to consider from the point of view of the consideration in relation to the search itself. The requirements that are specified under each of the different treaties, beginning with the Paris Convention,